All-Star 7 has been over for a little bit now. I feel like some of the online discourse has simmered down for the most part. I feel like I've been going so hard for All-Star 7, making, the videos with Bootsy and making sure the Riggory of All-Star 7 is getting out. Now doing this video. So it'll be nice to just make some videos about things that aren't pertinent to what is going on right now. But for today, we are still talking about All-Star 7. We are going to talk about how it should have went if it wasn't rigged. And I do this series a lot different now than I did when I first started. When I first started, it was really me just being like, okay, here's whatever I think, and it is right, and that is what we're going to do. Now, I think I have a little bit more of a bigger picture about what the general fandom thought. And obviously, I can have my own opinions, and I can think that a queen should have won one episode or won the lip sync here, whatever. But I generally do look at what most people think. I have the polls on my stories. I have polls, the Google Drive ones that I put on, where I get like thousands of you getting to give your opinions. And that really also helps look at the bigger picture, not just what my own thoughts are. So I'm going to be using all of that today to break down how the season would have gone if it wasn't rigged. This season, I think, was very heavily rigged. And you can go look and see all of the instances and the examples I have in the Riggory of All-Star 7 if you have not seen that yet. But today we're going to go episode by episode, look at every single queen, and talk about their runs, talk about their performances. We're going to do this a little bit differently than I would normally do this series, just because we don't have like a winner, 2 high placements, a low placement, and a bottom 2. So instead, we're going to break down 8th place to 1st place for each episode, give kind of like a really quick rundown of why the queens are placed where they are. I did actually have you guys rank every episode on my Instagram. You can go check out that. But I have my own opinions. I think there are some biases in those polls, especially towards queens like Trinity and Evie, who I just don't think got enough love from the fandom this season, or enough recognition from the fandom for their successes. So definitely checked that out. I agree with a lot of it, but I do have my own rankings here. And I think in general, a lot of the fandom's opinions on certain things have changed after it sat with them for a while. So I would be interested to see if I ran that poll again, how different it would be. But I know that my rankings from early on in the season are not exact anymore now that I have time to sit with and kind of take in and have it marinate, if you will, like a nice ribeye steak. So with I'm on some shit today. So let's, without further ado, just start breaking it down. Let's look at episode 1, Legends. And this episode in particular, I think is hard to judge because I think there were a couple standouts and then everyone else just did fine. You know what I mean? I think that if we were to rank, here is my ranking. In last place, I did put the Vivienne. I think she did fine. I think that her voice is lovely for this type of song. But because she was singing and it was more like really drawn out, she only had about 3 lines that she had. Whereas other queens like Shea and Monet, because they were rapping or because they were, singing a little bit more fast, they were able to put in just much more into their verse. Viv gave us like 3 lines and she looked stunning, but it just didn't match the same amount as I think other queens put into their performances. So in 7th, I put Trinity the Tuck because she flubbed her lines, and I think that just is kind of, when there's not many mistakes going on in any of these episodes, little tiny things like that really will cost you. And Trinity's never been the best at these, remix write-a-verse challenges. Her best one is still the very first one that she did on Category Is, and people don't even like that one. So I think this just isn't her type of challenge. She did fine. She looked stunning. She has the stage presence, but when it comes to the lyrics, they just aren't great, and she forgot them. So I have her here at 7. At 6, I have Raja. Raja, I was a little bit worried for and in this episode because she just wasn't as fun or animated or have as much energy as a lot of the other queens did. And we'll see later when they do the girl group challenge. This just isn't her challenge, which is fine. I mean, you don't have to be great at every single thing. She obviously slays in pretty much the entire rest of the season. But this episode did get me a little bit worried. Like, oof, is Raja going to be able to keep up with these girls? Spoiler alert, yes, she was. Here in this challenge, it was lacking a little bit for me. Now, the next three queens, I think you could put in any order just dependent on what your preferences are. I put Jada at 5. I think she looks stunning. I think her verse was funny. She sounded great. It was a great rap. I just preferred Jinx and Evie over her. Jinx, who I put at 4, I think really maybe was giving kind of the goofy, like, I don't know how to dance, like thing. But I think it does work here in this particular challenge because she is basically just playing a character. I mean, her entire verse is like, I'm the MILF. And obviously it went a little bit viral on TikTok, well, on at least gay TikTok, because for an entire week, all I saw was people recreating her walk when she does the rub-a-dub-dub, get in my tub thing. And I think of all of the verses, I think there are queens that wrote better verses, but for me, the only one that I will remember in a year or so will be Jinx's. Like, I'm gonna rub down all these sobs, like... I think it's so funny. She is giving exactly what I would want from her in this type of challenge, where it's like, you're a legend, talk about why you're a legend. And she's like, well, I'm a fucking MILF, so what do you want from me? I'm a MILF who can't dance. And I was like, you know what? I'm here for it. So I actually put Evie at 3. I think she had such a fun verse. Her melodic, I don't know, I never took music classes or anything like that. Her melody was different from everyone else's. It really stood out. And I think that her performance was really fun. You know, she didn't go over the top with, you know, the flips and the splits and all the things she can do. And, you know, some queens do just do that for the whole verse. But Evie gave us some layers. You know, she gave us like a fun, kooky intro. Then she went into some of the flips and stuff. She did some floor work. And she, you know, I think she did a really good job. And then Monet and Shea, who were the top 2 of this episode, are my top 2. So if we look at the breakdown of this episode, I had Jinx and Evie in the top with Monet and Shea as the 2 winners. In the real episode, Trinity actually got one of those high placements. I don't think that was fair. I think Jinx or Jada could have taken that spot, and I would have been like, yep, makes more sense. But as we see, Monet and Shea do get their first legendary legend stars, and Shea wins the lip sync. She blocks Trinity the tuck, and we move on to the second episode, which is the Snatch Game. Now, this one was difficult because there were 2 characters that they had to do. And some queens nailed both characters. Some queens nailed one. Their other was meh. Some of them, they had a really meh one, and then their other one was bleh. So, breaking it down was a little bit hard. I did put Evie as last because I think she was the only one who had a total flop of a character. Her Rico Nasty, it wasn't funny. I think she knew it wasn't funny. It just didn't work at all. And while her Boogeyman, I think, really did work, and it was funny, and she did a good job, I just think the fact that she had the one character of this entire Snatch Game that I think just fully did not work, I did put her as last. Next, in 7th place, which I hate to put her here because, I mean, she's such a Snatch Game legend from her first Snatch Game where she played Donald Trump, I put the Vivienne. And the reason I have her so low is because I think both of her characters were fine. Like, they were fine. She got a chuckle out of, you know, both of them, but neither of them were hilarious. Neither of them had the RuPaul or the judges cracking up. I think overall she did a safe, fine performance in both of her characters. Whereas Jada was, you know, safe, fine, meh with her Lady Chablis, but her prince, I think, really worked. You could tell she maybe didn't have an answer for everything that RuPaul asked her, but when she didn't have an answer, she still was able to do something funny to kind of like look over there it, for lack of a better term. And she really was able to make the prince funny, which we saw them show a lot of her prince and then barely any of her Lady Chablis, just because I think they wanted to highlight the best parts of these queens' performances this season, and obviously Jada's Prince, miles better than her Lady Chablis. In 5th place, I have Shea Coulee, who similarly, I think, had one character that really worked and another character that was just kind of there. Her Miss J was just there, but her Elsa, I think, was funny. I don't think it was like, a standout of the entire episode, but I still think it was good. So I put Shea at 5th. 4th place, we have Monet Exchange, who both her characters worked. We didn't see a ton of either of her characters, but especially her Mike Tyson, I think, will stand out among fans for years to come as like a really, really solid, fun Snatch Game performance. And here's where I make my first kind of controversial move. I know a lot of people think Raja deserved top 2, and if we saw more of Raja, I might agree with you, but we didn't. And it's hard to judge and say that Raja was better than Trinity when both Snatch Games were pretty much just filled with Trinity being hilarious and having funny quips and, throwing in little zingers every now and again. Whereas Raja, we kind of saw a lot of her Madam, which was, top tier, so good, but we barely saw her Diana Vreeland. And whether that's because it was great and, they really just wanted to highlight Trinity instead, or because it was not great and they didn't want to show it being a little bit subpar, we don't know. But we barely saw her Diana Vreeland, and I can't put her as 2nd place when Trinity got so many more laughs, had so many more standout moments. And, if we saw the whole Snatch Game from, beginning to end, maybe we would all think differently. But for now, I kept Trinity and Jinx as the top 2, with Raja and Monet in the high positions, which is exactly what happened on the episode. No Riggory in this one. Then we see Trinity and Jinx lip sync to Rumor Has It by Adele. I do think it was really close. Obviously, Trinity loses her wig, which, I guess happened. She, recovered pretty well. I think Trinity had better moments in the lip sync, but I think overall Jinx was more consistent. So if either of them won, I would have been like, yeah, sure, that's fine. But Jinx wins, and she blocks Shea Coulee. Now we move on to the 3rd episode, which is the Fortune of Realness Ball, or Realness Ball? Fortune of Realness Ball. And I said in my last video I didn't understand the title, and you guys explained it, and I was like, yeah, I still don't get it. Like, I get it. I just don't get it. You know what I mean? So, regardless, it's a ball. This one was a little bit harder to judge because there were 3 looks that they had to present, and very few queens, I think, knocked all 3 looks out of the ballpark. I think that's the phrase. Sports, right? So, Jinx, last place for me. I think that her first look was fine, but if you asked me what the category was, I never would have said Vanna White or game show host or whatever. I would have said, like, witchy Renaissance something. So she looked great. I just don't think it was necessarily Vanna White, which, to be fair, a lot of these looks did not read Vanna White. Her second look was the best of the night for her. It was so funny, this, whatever happened to Baby Jane, but it was like Barbarella. I think it was super, super good. And then her last look, it's just not good. So this is not Jinx's wheelhouse. I'm not shocked that she was last in this challenge. Next is someone I am shocked is this low, and it's Evie Oddly. I mean, she's kind of known for her looks. I mean, she has these crazy, fun, outside-of-the-box looks. But 2 of the 3, I don't think work. Her Vanna White, not Vanna White at all. Less Vanna White than Jinx's Vanna White. I mean, it's giving more like Vegas. And then her middle look, which was the before and after or something like that. Basically, they just have to like mash up 2 pop culture references. She does Cardi B Arthur, and I think this is my favorite of the entire category of everyone who did this look. I think her Cardi B Arthur is so funny. It really makes sense. I see the journey. I see how they're mashed up. I think she did a really good job. But the one that she made, it's fine. Like, it's fine. It's not hideous. It's not, like, I hate it. But it isn't what, you would expect from Evie. In season 11, her Farm to Runway is one of the greatest design looks ever. She looks so good. This is just like, I expected better. So then in 6th place, we have the Vivienne, who I think across the board just did safe. Completely fine, nothing flopped, but nothing necessarily worked that well either. It was just like, yeah, her blue gown that she made, it's good. Her Princess Diana thing, sure, fine. Her Vanna White look, it's I see it, fine. But nothing stood out to me, and if I hadn't looked at the looks before recording this, I would have already forgot him again. So that's why she's here at number 6. Number 5, I put Monet Exchange. Her Vanna White was good. It was fine. It looked like Vanna. It was fine. Her Bob the Drag Queen, Queen Elizabeth look, I think was so smart, so funny. One of the best of that category. And the look that she made, I think was good. Not a standout, but it was good. And then the top 4 is the same top 4 from this episode. I don't really need to get into it that much. Shea, I think, had some really fun looks. Raja had 2 of the greatest looks of the episode with one flop of a look in the middle. But I think that her Vanna White and the one that she made were so good that it has to put her above Shea, who I think had, like, the gold tooth fairy look was fine, but it was a little bit forgettable. Her Vanna White was more like 60s than I think like the 70s or 80s reference that I think of when I think of Vanna White. And then her bridal gown, I think just because we've seen her do bridal before, it wasn't like a huge standout in my mind, especially because I liked her first bridal look better than this one from All Stars 5. So for me, Raja just barely passes Shea, but for me, Trinity and Jada knocked this episode out of the park. Both of their Vanna looks, so Vanna, so stunning. They look so good. Their before and after, I know this Trinity look gets some hate. I don't think it's like one of my favorites of the category, but I still see her reference. I see what she was going for. It looks well made. Jada's bag lady, super good. She looks so hot. And then both of the looks that they created are 2 of the greatest design looks we have ever seen on Drag Race. I will never get over this Trinity red look. It is so stunning. Like, if you just showed this to me, I never would have thought she made this. I would have think this is something she paid some, top tier designer to make for her. So all in all, amazing episode for them both. They lip sync. Jada wins. Makes sense. We move on to the Fairy Tale Justice, where I had a really hard time with this episode. So we can kind of just go through the bottom 3. I think Shea just didn't do anything with her character. I think Monet was just a little bit too low energy. I think Jada was great, but just got a little bit overshadowed by the top 5. Trinity, amazing job. Great fun character. Great redemption for her in this challenge where she had done pretty poorly in Jersey Justice. So to see her do a really good job here is great. And it was because she was able to rely on more of the physical comedy rather than just thinking of a funny thing off the cuff to say. So Trinity did really good. But to me, Raja and Evie and Jinx and Viv were the standouts of this episode. With Evie and Jinx, oh my gosh. So I watched this a couple times, and I gave some polls on my story for some of the choices from this video that I just couldn't make myself. I let you guys make them. I really think Evie could have been top 2 this episode. I think she was so good as a big bad wolf. It was a fully realized character. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had to do scenes in both of the skits, so she was pulling double duty. I think she did so good in this episode. But Jinx, I think, also did really well. But I put it up on my story. You guys, more than majority of you, way more than a majority of you voted for Jinx to be top 2. And I'm not about to argue with that. She did a great job. So she and Vivienne are the top 2. Vivienne obviously slays this entire challenge and is the best of the best. Vivienne also kills the lip sync. So, like I said in the Riggory video, this is really where Vivienne comes alive. And for the next couple of episodes, she's going to absolutely slay it. So, episode 5 is the Draguation challenge. And this one was almost impossible to rank because I think everyone did a good job. There was not a bad performance in the bunch. And it was just based off of little things that I personally liked better than someone else's that led to this ranking. But I'm sure that everyone would probably have a different ranking and they would all be justified because I think everyone did super well. I did put Monet last. I think she just didn't have as many funny moments or as many emotional moments. So that I also think her coming out being the first queen to go, with so many great performances, Monet's kind of gets lost in the shuffle by the end, which is what I also think happens to Shea. I ended up putting Jada 7th and Trinity 6th. I think that Trinity having a little bit more of the emotional content lended to her performance. Jada obviously had great moments. I think she just gets lost in the shuffle a little bit as well, along with Monet. Shea obviously has some really, really good moments, but I think Evie could have been high this episode over Shea. I think Evie really, really, really did well in this episode. She kind of played that like goober, weirdo outcast. You know, she trips and throws her papers everywhere. And then she goes into talking about failing and why it's important to fail and how it's helped her to fail. And I just think Evie really, she did not necessarily had a character because she was being Evie, but just her stance and her perspective, I think, is such a standout among this group. But I do think the top 3 of this episode was very obviously Raja, Jinx, and Viv. Viv does such a good job being the drunk. You know, I always worry because it's the line where it becomes too much is very thin. And you can cross that line and suddenly you're like, ugh, it's getting cringe, it's too much, like, drunk people don't act like this, blah, 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 blah. But I think Viv was very realistic, she was very funny, and she never took it too far. But the top 2 of this episode are the real top 2. I don't think I switched a single top 2 yet from this season. We have Jinx and Raja. I put Jinx as second, only because I think that the overall message of her speech was a little bit meandering. It came together in the end, and obviously it all made sense. But throughout it, it was a little bit like she was just going from here to there to there to there, and just making jokes about whatever. But I think Raja's, because she sets it up with, here are 5 things you should know about the real world. Then she immediately starts us off with, here's the path we're going to take. Let's go on this journey. You know exactly what you're in for. And I just think I liked the structure of hers better. I think she had just as many jokes. I think she was just as funny as Jinx. She'd been doing so well this whole time, and now she finally got the flowers for it. And this is where this season is so hard, because when everybody is doing so well the entire time, you can be slaying, but if you're not in that top 2, you're not getting almost any credit for it. And I think that was really Raja's issue this season, where she was slaying every single episode, but there was always 2 queens who slayed it just like a little tiny bit more. So they lip sync, Jinx wins, and we move on to the TRL challenge, which is going to be the first episode where I change the top 2. This one it's a little bit different because we've already had a remix challenge where, you know, they have to write a verse on a song. That one was a little bit more freeform. This challenge in particular, they are supposed to be Y2K girl groups. And to me, when you add that specific stipulation to it, the queens have to kind of add that to their performance for it to make sense. And, you know, I brought up the Carrie Colby thing in the 1960s challenge on season 14, and I think that kind of fits here as well. And for me, the top 2 of the actual episode, which were Vivienne and Evie, I just don't think fit the point of the challenge as much as Shea and Monet did. They had the Y2K references, they had the Y2K looks, they had the Y2K dance moves. Like, they were just, I think, at the top of their game, and they were able to take their performance and make it fit the point of the challenge. You know, I think a lot of queens in this episode did really well. Those were the 2 that I think really were able to bring their performances to the specific place that this challenge called for. Raja, I think, really struggled here, didn't know her words. Her verse was just kind of there. Jinx, I think, goes too far off, you know, script. I think that in a Y2K challenge, why are you playing an old woman who's trying to, you know, hang with the cool chicks in this band? I just think it didn't make sense in this particular type of challenge. Trinity, I think, you know, she did fine, but she just wasn't as good. Vivienne, I think similarly to Jinx, she just went too far in her own direction. When you're going to be a Y2K girl group and her entire verse is about how she's a hot British girl, I think if she would have just married that concept to the like British invasion of the early 2000s with, Spice Girls, and, maybe that's more late 90s, but maybe, just doing that a little bit more would have made more sense. But it just felt like, okay, she's talking about bangers and mash. I don't know what that has to do with the challenge, but she still did a good job. Jada, I think, did a really good job. I think she had a really fun rap. I think she had a really fun look. I think she had really fun energy. She was able to sort of marry that performance to the concept of the challenge, but still it wasn't enough for me. Evie is playing like a industry plant robot, which I think is a really fun concept, especially when I think a lot of people think of the early 2000s as just like, pretty white pop singers that all sing about the same thing and all their songs sound exactly the same and they're all just like robots on the exact same trajectory. And she really, I think, fits that perfectly. And it makes sense for Evie to want to do something that out of the box. I just think Monet and Shea did better. So that's where I put them. But I think storyline-wise, it does make sense for Evie to get a win here. I get why they would want to give Viv a win. So storyline-wise, makes sense. But when we look at the actual challenge, I do think this was Monet and Shea's to win. They still are going to have, I think this is actually an okay, I don't think it's rigged, I think it's kind of a fun twist where they had to give away a star to someone. It adds to the strategy, it adds layers to what is going on. So we have Jinx, I think, is still going to give hers to Jada, and I think that Raja is still going to give hers to Evie, so nothing would change. If we look at the next challenge, which is the legendary looks, they just have to make a look, one singular look. This is very easy to judge. Jinx does a much better look than her first look, but it's not great. Raja, I think, had a really fun concept. I just think she took it a little bit too far out of the box and not in a good way. I think it just kind of lost its perspective and it was just a little bit too abstract where it's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore, girl. Viv, similarly to the first design challenge, does fine, but other queens just do better. Evie, I think, does better than her first look, but I think the look that she described in the workroom was so avant-garde and fun, and it sounded like it was going to be so good that when she brought this out, it was just kind of a disappointment. Monet looks stunning in this bodysuit, but for me, this is another one where I was very torn. And you guys, I think the fandom in general is obsessed with this Jada Essence Hall look. And I love it too. I think she looks stunning. But I think if you were to switch this fabric, and I'm going to attempt to do a Yuha Hamasaki, and when she like makes little corrections on like what she wants in a look, if this were just a regular fabric, it's a little bit basic for Jada, because we've seen Jada make some really kind of out there looks. This one just felt a little bit more simple. And I think she looks stunning. She looks amazing. But if I were to personally compare it to Shea Coulee, who did kind of a complete reconstruction of the look she was given and gave us a time period. She gave us a perspective. I think it was super cool. I will say I don't like the leggings that just go right into the shoe, but I personally think Shea should have been top 2 here. But again, if the polls and the general internet mean anything, I must be on crack. So I kept it as Jada and Trinity. Trinity, I think, just, oh my gosh, knocked it out of the park. And this is where I think a lot of the Trinity bias comes in, because, like, these are people looking at this look and saying, it's just so tacky, I don't know, while she's literally wearing, like, a stunning ball gown that if anyone wore this for, like, top 4 eleganza, people would have gone berserk over. I think Trinity created 2 of the greatest design looks of all time. Yeah, I just can't sing enough praise for Trinity in these design challenges and a lot of these other challenges as well. So our top 4 does not change. Our top 2 does not change. Trinity wins the lip sync, and we move on to the acting challenge. And this one I also changed, and you guys actually agreed with me on this one. This is a challenge where I think there were some queens that did really well and some queens that just kind of were forgettable. I think Jada was the worst of the episode. She was actually put in the top, which I fully disagree with. She was high in this episode, and I just don't see it. I think that her character was kind of hard to do anything really great with, but another queen probably could have made it work a little bit better than Jada did here. Evie, again, I think she went for something different for her. She was the Regina George, and I think she would have been better off playing like what Raja played, because I just don't think she was able to make it fully come together. Shea, I think, did a really good job with a role that was kind of forgettable, but when there's just so many more zany, fun, wacky roles, you can only do so well with the kind of Mary Sue. Jinx Monsoon, I think, did fine. I think she did a really fun job with her character, but I think you could kind of see her trying to make it bigger. I think that, you know, some of these other characters were just bigger already. You know, the Monet being like the crazy Trelawney teacher, Viv being the evil principal, Raja being the goth chick, and then, you know, she's the Gretchen Wieners, which of the three plastics in Mean Girls is kind of the most forgettable when you just look at her on paper. You know, Karen is a dumbass. Regina is the most evil bitch on earth. And Gretchen is just kind of spoiled. You know what I mean? She doesn't have as big of a personality. Jinx, I think, took it in a really big direction. She was taking big swings, and I think some of them definitely paid off. But I think, me personally, I could just see her really trying to stand out, and to me that kind of took away from the performance. I think she maybe could have made it smaller and it would have felt bigger. Trinity, I think, really had a funny role with the Karen, and I think she made it work. She was super funny. She was giving it in the face and the inflection, and I just think she knocked the role out of the park. Here is the contention. In the actual episode, Viv and Raja are the top two. And to me, I think Raja did a great job, but I think Monet did an even better job. And luckily, you guys agreed with me on this one, and I felt so justified for once. You wouldn't think of Monet getting this role, this kind of Professor Trelawney from Harry Potter, I'm the cool teacher role. And she really made it funny. She managed to make it work fully. She hit every single line and every single joke landed. And I just think she was a standout. And whereas I do think Raja was also great in this challenge and had a better runway than Monet did, I just think this was really a great moment for Monet. So I put her in the top two, and a majority of you guys did as well. But Viv, much like the improv challenge, she owns this entire episode. She was doing so well that RuPaul was cracking up during the recording. Like, we don't see that very often, where RuPaul is, like, cackling while they're recording it. So I think this was just, like, Viv's moment. You know what I mean? She is just so good at being ridiculous. What would happen if we get a lip sync between Monet X Change and the Vivienne to Super Freak? I think Monet wins. This was just not Vivienne's lip sync. I think she was trying some things, and I applaud that, but Monet would completely annihilate this lip sync. So who would she block? In the actual episode, Raja blocks Jada, and I think that Monet would do the same thing, because if we're looking at the star count at this point, Jada is in the lead with Monet. I think she's either going to block Jada or Jinx. And if she does block Jinx, that would make things very interesting as we get to the end. So we're going to talk about both. We'll go over what if she did both, because they're both a possibility, honestly. So let's look at the TikTok Dance Challenge, which is another episode that Monet absolutely slaughters. And yeah, Jinx wins this episode, which is why it's like, okay, if she got blocked by Monet, that's 2 stars that she's down, which would be very interesting. We're going to have to wait and see what happens there. Vivienne, I just don't think her I don't know how to dance worked here, and I don't think it works as she continues to do it for the rest of the season. Raja, I think, had a really fun concept. I just think other queens did better. Same with Trinity. I think her tucking thing was great, but I liked everyone else's better. Shea, I think, had a great dance, but the video part where she's like explaining it is just a little bit dull. And then we have our top 4. We're my top 4. The actual top 4 had Shea, Jada, for me, I really liked Jada's. She, has this persona to her drag where she's this like, I'm fabulous and rich and amazing, and you can be too. And that's kind of what she's going for here. She's like, we're gonna run from the paparazzi. And I think it was super funny. I think it was still kind of a dance, kind of ish. Did it fit exactly what the challenge was asking for to make a viral dance? No. But I think that she made a funny video and it really, showed off her personality. And at the end of the day, this is part branding, part dance. I think her branding was definitely better than the dance, but I think she did a solid job. Evie, I think, did great in both. I think she was really kind of honing into that, like, Gen Z, I'm just sitting in bed all day depressed because Jessica is talking to my crush Ken and my life is so hard and everything is terrible and nobody understands me. And she just sits in bed and watches TikTok all day, right? So Evie's going for that. She's like, hey you, I'm a weirdo too. And you don't have to lay in your bed depressed because we're going to go jump around with some like whatever. And I think it was funny and it totally fit the challenge. It fit her brand. And I think she had a fun dance. So, this is another one I was a little bit, I don't know. Jinx had, hands down, the funniest of all of the videos. She had a very, very, very funny video. But they said make a TikTok. A TikTok dance. A viral dance. And Jinx made a peanut butter sandwich, which is like, it's fine. It's her brand, sort of, is like this like lovable weirdo. I'm just gonna make a peanut butter sandwich and eat it. I get it. I wanted to put Evie in that top two, because I think Evie really fit what the challenge was asking for better. Even if hers wasn't as funny as Jinx's was, part of me really is like, if I were to put Jinx as not top two for this challenge, I think people would literally light me ablaze. And I know I'm definitely in the minority here. So I'm going to keep Jinx top two. I mean, she did have the funniest. But to me, this wasn't a comedy challenge as much as it was a branding challenge. And I think Evie and Monet really branded themselves great. And Jada. I mean, I think a lot of people branded themselves great in this challenge. And, I guess Jinx being the MILF does come into play here. But this is so hard because I think they all did well. I think so many queens did well in this episode. But for me personally, if this was me judging this challenge, I would pick Evie in the top two. But this isn't just about me. And I can't say that Jinx didn't deserve to be top two just because I did like someone else's performance a little bit better. Because I'm definitely in the minority there. So Jinx is going to be top two with Monet. They get to do the iconic spoken word lip sync. Another reason why I think they definitely wanted Jinx in that top two, because Jinx is going to slay this. But Monet slays it even harder, and she wins for the week. And we move on to the roast. Another challenge that I think everyone did well at. Even Jada, who really struggled, was still able to kind of bring it back in the last couple minutes with some self-deprecating humor. This is another one where I think you could rank in a couple different ways, and I would not argue it. I think Shea and Jada did kind of the worst, and then Evie Monet did kind of middle of the pack, and then the top four totally did well. I think Monet was high in this episode over Raja. I would have put Raja there, especially because she had to open the show, and she started on such a funny and harsh note. She was harsh. Her jokes were mean, but it was so funny. And if you look at the top two, it's a different top two. I think Vivienne fully deserved this top two over Trinity. Trinity did fantastic, but Vivienne had a much, much, much shorter of what we saw in the edit set. And Vivienne got more laughs in that 80 seconds than Trinity got in, over 2 minutes. I think Vivienne deserved it. And if we were to believe her tweets, she probably had a lot of much better jokes that didn't even make the cut. So for me, Vivienne and Jinx were the top two here. And who would win this lip sync to, what was the song? Oh, Ava Max, Miss Ava Max. I think that they were going to give it to Jinx. I think that Vivienne would probably do fine. So let's move on to the last episode, which is the variety show. Monet destroyed this episode. Shea annihilated this episode. Raja did so well. Jada did so well. I think she did a little bit better than Evie, who they actually put in the top 4. For me, Viv had the most forgettable. I think Jinx's just felt small compared to a lot of these other queens that had a ton of stuff going on. And yeah, let's look at these star counts. So Monet is fully in the lead here with 5. But I think it honestly does make sense to have 2 stars here, because this is kind of a big challenge where, they have a lot of prep. They know exactly what they need to do. They can do it all from home and they can bring it. So I think 3 stars is too much, but I don't think 2 stars for this last challenge is too much. And it doesn't really change anything either. So now let's look at our 2 scenarios. Depending on who Monet blocked in that one episode, if she blocks Jinx, which I do think is the more likely option, we have a 3-way tie between Jada, Jinx, and Vivienne, and the only 2 that are solidified as going into the finals are Monet and Shea. In this case, I think Monet and Shea would each pick one person to bring with them to the end. I think that is the kind of shocking move that they would do. And in this case, I think they're going to bring Jinx and Vivienne, because one of the 3, Jada's the best lip syncer. And also, Jada kind of was given an extra star. She really only earned 2, was given 1 by Jinx. So if they're being fair, they would bring Jinx and Vivienne, who had to earn all 3 of their stars. And Jinx especially had 2 stars blocked. And in a lip sync SmackDown, that's what I would do. So we're going to look at both of these scenarios. I genuinely do think, actually we're not, because honestly, I think she would block Jinx from getting a star in that episode. So we're going to look at what if we had a top 4 of Trinity, Monet, Shea, and Vivienne. But first we have to look at the other, she done already had hers lip sync SmackDown. They couldn't come up with a better name. I guess not. So the first lip sync is Vivienne versus Evie to push it. But since Vivienne isn't here, we're just going to put in Trinity. Sorry, Trinity. Evie is going to win. And then our second lip sync is Jada versus Raja. And Raja wins that. Then we have Raja versus Evie. 2 sisters are doing it for themselves. And I'm sorry, Evie wins this lip sync. Evie wins the $50,000 prize. And now we can look at the other lip sync SmackDown. And we're just going to place Vivienne in where Trinity was, because it makes my life easier. So our first lip sync is Judas with Shea and Jinx. And I think it was close. I think it was very, very close. I would like to see the full cut, but I will give it to Jinx. From what we saw, Jinx had a much more dynamic performance than Shea did. So our second lip sync is So What? And this is between Vivienne and Monet. And honestly, this is the only performance where I would ever think Vivienne could beat Monet in a lip sync. This was just not Monet's best lip sync. And we also didn't see a lot of Monet because the lip sync really highlighted Trinity. So this is hard because this is kind of a fun, campy song that I think Vivienne could really make work. When she can kind of add some kind of fun element, that is when she's going to do a really, really good lip sync. And Monet, I think, does better recently. I think season 10 she was that way, but recently she really does good in the lip syncs that she can just fucking slay. You know what I mean? Genuinely, I think that Monet would win. I think we would see more of her in the lip sync edit, that's for sure. But I think Vivienne would put up a fight. I think Vivienne would do really well in this lip sync. So we're going to stick with Monet versus Jinx. And if we're basing it off of who won that lip sync, then Monet wins. And we're also going to look at who has the most stars. It's Monet. So, and that's not to undercut Jinx, because if we're looking at the track record, Monet was given an extra star and Jinx was blocked of 2 stars. They're actually even. They both won 5 challenges. So it's very even. And I think in this case, Jinx isn't so far ahead when it comes to like wins and stuff that you could justify Monet winning by winning that last lip sync. So really, I think it's much closer in reality than it was on the actual show between Monet and Jinx. I think they both did really well throughout the competition. I think that if we look at the averages of how they did, how the rankings went, which obviously these are just my rankings, Monet had the best average overall. I think Jinx had some episodes where she was, I think Jinx was last place in both of the design challenges, so that definitely doesn't help. And even some of the other challenges, like the girl group, I think she was at the bottom of. Whereas I think Monet was mostly either at the tippy top or towards the middle. So that definitely helps. If you look at my averages here, which are just mine, I'm sure if you did this, you would have some different numbers than I would. The top 4 averages are the top 4 of the actual season, with Raja being technically 5th place and Evie being technically 6th place because of that other SmackDown where they were the final 2 of that left. This, I think, just shows that the last episode, that SmackDown, meant absolutely nothing because really they were just rewarding whoever did the best throughout the season. So this is where I'm at. I don't want you to think that from this I'm saying Jinx did not deserve to win. Jinx did deserve to win. She did really, really well throughout the season. But I think Monet also deserved to win. I think there, as you could see, were a couple challenges. I think she could have been in that top 2 when she wasn't. And because of that, she missed out on stars and didn't have as great of a track record as Jinx did. I think if you look at it from a little bit less of a rigged perspective, Monet and Jinx were kind of evenly matched throughout the season. And in challenges that Jinx didn't do great in, Monet did great in. In some challenges that Monet didn't do great in, Jinx did do great in. I think they were very evenly matched throughout the season. And when it came to that final lip sync, Monet beat her. But there is the argument, okay, well, why does one lip sync determine the entire season? Which I do agree with. But if you look at the entire season from this perspective, I think they were evenly matched. I think that they both did a super, super good job throughout the season, and either of them could have won in my eyes, and I would have been like, yep. And the only reason there was ever any outrage is because of if you get to the final 4, you have to do a lip sync SmackDown for the crown, and that's what's going to matter. And when they changed that up last minute, that is what caused all of the drama and the trauma. But they're both deserving. They're both icons. They both did so well this season. That's what I'm going to take from this season, honestly. It was the correct top 2, and whichever one won, I am fine with. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I feel like this might be a controversial one. The Jinx fans scared me. There are a couple fan bases that scare me. The Trixie and Katya fandom scare me. The Jinx Monsoon fandom scare me. The Ben de la Creme fans scare me. And I'm sure that they will be in my comments ripping me to shreds, which will just reinforce that I am scared of them. So with that, it has been a crazy All-Star 7. This was the first time I ever did a full recap series for the entire season. Overall, I'm happy with the season, but I will never watch that finale again. So that's where I'm at. It was a solid season. It was so much fun, such good drag, amazing queens, and I'm waiting for the reunion. So with that, the All-Star 7 coverage is over. And you guys voted. You guys want to see some Season 9 in the Riggory of. So we'll probably take a couple weeks off, do some different videos on different Drag Race topics. But the next season that you will see the Riggory of will be Season 9 of Drag Race. So I'm excited to rewatch that season. That's one of my favorite seasons. So many of my favorite queens are on that season. Aja, Sasha, Shea, Peppermint, Pheromone, Alexis Michelle, like so many good queens are on that season. So, and so many great storylines. Nina Bonina has a really great storyline in that season. Peppermint has a good storyline in that season. Sasha and Shay, like Trinity. Oh my gosh, there's so many good seasons, so many good queens on that season, so many good storylines. I'm really excited to see the storyline perspective and how that affects the critiques, because I haven't watched that season since starting this channel. So when I watched it, I never looked at it as like let's see what production is thinking like I do now. So it'll be an interesting watch. I'm excited. And that's where we are going next. So I want to thank all of you so much for watching. Here are the links to all of my social medias. Thank you for 2,000 followers on Twitter. My Twitter's kind of been wild lately, but I'm kind of living. So go check me out on Twitter. Go check me out on Instagram. And if you want to support me, Patreon is the best way to do it. We have $1, $3, $5 tiers, and we're about to shake up some stuff over there that I'm excited for. And oh yeah, here, look, are my iconic $3 and $5 patrons. They're amazing. They've been with me for so long, and I just want to tell you all how much I love and appreciate you. So with that, the case has been closed on how All-Star 7 should have gone. I don't know. I don't care. And I will see you all in the next one.